"I won't be long, Dad. Don't worry about staying up for me. I'll leave a key under the doormat." And he was gone. Daniel disappeared from the dimly lit driveway, jumped into his friend's car, and disappeared into the night. I felt the cold air brush against my cheeks and closed the door. Daniel was my son and was growing up a lot quicker than I had hoped. Since turning 21, he had been out almost every night this week. I understand he's a young adult, and that young adults should be fending for themselves, and he continues to tell me that he hasn't yet figured life out, and that he'll be moving in with some friends soon. The problem is he's been saying that since September, and it's January now, almost February. Admittedly, I'm not yet pushing him like other parents might. He does have a job, and in his defense, he gives me some rent money every week. It doesn't bother me that it's an insignificant amount, though. I mean, he only works part-time on the weekends, and he barely earns $70 a week. I suppose the main reason I accept his choices is that I'm just grateful for his company. My wife left us when he was very young, and we've bonded a lot because of it. He's all I have left, and I'm actually scared for the day that he does decide to pack up his bags and leave. I'm becoming very used to spending my nights alone now, but I suppose it's all good practice for when Daniel does leave for real. So I fell into the couch in an almost identical position to the night before and switched on the TV. I usually find some cheesy crime drama or comedy, and I hope it keeps me entertained enough to stay awake. Even though Daniel always leaves a key under the mat, I like to stay up and make sure that he arrives home safely. It comforts me, and I guess I've become very attached to Daniel, being a single parent for so long. I awoke to a program about police brutality, which instantly grabbed my attention. In fact, it was so good, I almost missed what I had stayed up for. It had become second nature to me, the soft movement along the gravel outside. Our front yard's covered in gravel, and it creates a very distinctive sound when somebody walks on it. I made sure it wasn't a cat or a ferret or something, and I listened for a few more seconds. As it grew closer, it was far too heavy to be an animal, so I knew that it was Daniel. I paused the TV, watched his elongated shadow approach the door through the blinds, and glanced up at the clock. Right on cue, 11:30. That was the time he arranged when he started going out regularly, and he was pretty good at sticking by it. I heard the key turn, the door slowly open, squeaking. The hinges were on their last legs, and I'd been meaning to get it fixed. "Evening, Dan," I called after hearing the door slam shut. I heard him mutter, breathlessly. When Daniel comes home from a night of drinking, he always heads straight upstairs. Personally, I don't think he can handle his drink as well as he thinks he can. Oh well, I think to myself, even more reason to stay up every night. I unpaused my program and decided to see it out until the end. It only had about 15 minutes left anyway. 10 minutes went by, and then I heard a door slam in the distance. It was difficult to tell how close it actually was, but it's what followed that put me on edge. It was the gravel again. With every step, it became louder, and by the time whoever was in my front yard had reached the doorstep, I was standing up. It was far too late for people to be knocking, and I wasn't expecting anybody other than Daniel tonight. I paused the TV and stood in silence, wondering what this stranger was doing on my porch. After a few seconds, the TV started to whir despite nothing playing. The clock ticked leisurely when I had a terrible thought. What if Daniel had gotten into trouble and the police had tracked his residential address? I couldn't think of anybody else who'd possibly be knocking this late. Who knows what the hell he gets up to when he's drunk, I thought. My mind was racing at this point. He didn't sound too healthy earlier. What if he'd gone beyond his limits and done something really stupid? Before I could think about it anymore, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the empty house. In that moment, I was terrified. If it was the police, I don't think I wanted to know what they had to say. And if it wasn't, then who the fuck was it? In a split moment of panic, I decided I would peek through the south-facing blind before facing the intruder in person. This window protrudes outwards towards the street, and at the right angle, You can turn your head and just about see the front porch. I remember leaving the front porch light on so Daniel could find the key when he arrived home. This meant that I would be able to see the stranger illuminated. More importantly, they wouldn't be able to see me. I made my way to the far window and cautiously lifted up the blind. The street was tarnished in darkness. The closest street light flickered in the distance. I could sense a slight breeze as the trees swayed rhythmically. My heart was beating even faster now, my mind filled with dread. I took a deep breath and awkwardly adjusted my body to get a good view of the porch. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had to be hallucinating. It had to be some of the wine I had earlier, because this couldn't be happening. There, waiting on the porch, was Daniel. He was typing away on his phone. Clear as day, my son was standing on the porch. Before I could even react, my phone buzzed from across the room. Light illuminated the screen as it buzzed for a second time. I was still in awe about what the hell was going on, so I lunged at my phone and read the following message. Dad, sorry I'm a bit later than usual. Are you still up? I'm sure I left my key under the mat, but I must have forgotten it. Can you let me in, please? I could barely hold my phone. My fingers quivered, my whole body was shaking, and my blood turned cold. I felt sick. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Somebody or something had just made their way down the stairs and was standing at the foot of them. I could hear heavy but controlled breathing. I dropped the phone and without giving a second thought bolted towards the window. I threw up the blinds and with all the force I had smashed the window. I hurled myself through the remains of the shattered glass and landed on the cold, uneven gravel below. Dad, what the I didn't let him finish. I grabbed Daniel and pulled him to the edge of the driveway. What the fuck is wrong with you? But I didn't reply. I was staring at the house. From inside, arched at the door, a tall, dark figure had appeared. The hallway light had been switched off, but the porch light scarcely portrayed the silhouette of this thing that stood in our hallway. Its back was broken, bent in half and mangled. It stood at an impossible angle, but still displayed a grotesque, wide smile that covered the entire bottom half of its face. Its eyes were prodigious and sinister, and it stared right at me the whole time. It had no pupils, just a flush of white, and it didn't blink once. It started to reach through the letterbox, its arms extending at least 3 feet into the cold night, and I could just make out its fingers, razor-sharp, glistening in the darkness. They looked capable of slicing through metal sheets with little effort. I was shook beyond belief. I hadn't even noticed the porch light had slowly started to dim. It steadily raised its index finger and curled it slowly towards the door, inciting us back into the house. That horrifying grin still plastered across its face, not once adjusting. Daniel and I stood in silence, petrified. Once it realized we weren't going to accept the invitation, it started to laugh. A cackling sound pulsated across our front yard. It was deafening. And I wanted to get the fuck out of there, so I grabbed Daniel. He was in complete shock, but he managed to pick himself up. The cackling sound continued behind us. We ignored it, and we ran for our lives. And we didn't look back. People love secrets. They love telling that first person and getting the weight off their chest. They love being on the receiving end, being trusted with a part of someone. And most of all, they love finding out other people's secrets. There's the common saying, I wish I was a fly on the wall. I wish I could have secretly overheard that conversation, known that secret. People will do a lot to know secrets. They want to be privy to conversations about them that are happening behind closed doors for a reason. It's the impossible equivalent of having your best friend ask your crush if they like you. Meanwhile, you're on the other extension trying to convince yourself that you don't really care if they like you anyways, just in case they don't. Being a fly on the wall, or even being the wall itself, is, of course, impossible. Impossible, at least for most people, but not me. When I was 7, I visited my grandpa's farm in Bulb-Cajun. He took me out to the shed, to this car he'd been working on restoring for about 4 decades. He kept saying things like, "She's a classic," and "They'll never make a car like this again." And if this girl could talk. But she could talk. At least I could hear something. Something faint, like when someone's watching TV downstairs and your door's closed. It's the background noise, but it's still something. I went back out to the garage that night and sat in front of the car. I was trying to hear what those voices were saying. I knew that it wasn't the car, that cars don't talk, or they can't talk. But I also knew that I was hearing something, and it was definitely coming from the car. I couldn't get beyond just wisps and whispers, and soon I got bored and I went inside to win some toonies off my grandpa at Ramoli. But I didn't forget about the car. Instead, I started noticing whispers from other things, and then from everything. Everything was talking to me, sending me messages. Looking back, you'd think it would be annoying, even drive me insane trying to figure out what was real, what was the noise inside my brain. But it just wasn't. I didn't act out of the ordinary, no one suspected anything, and I just went on with my life. It wasn't until I was in high school that things changed. Call it an adolescent desire to always want more, but suddenly hearing the whispers wasn't good enough. I would stare at inanimate objects for hours in my room, becoming progressively more pissed off that this was it, that I wasn't getting anything. I could fiddle with the imaginary rabbit ears and antenna all I wanted, but I couldn't get anything to come in clearly. This went on for weeks until one night, sick with frustration, I chucked my alarm clock at the wall and a piece of it snapped off. And it hurt. I felt the pain. Like when you bend your finger back too far, or you kick a soccer ball wrong with your foot. The alarm clock hit the wall and broke, and it hurt me. After that, I kind of figured it out. I learned that somehow, for whatever reason, inanimate objects weren't inanimate to me. I felt pain when a glass broke. I got hot when a toaster was toasting bread. I could feel a calculator thinking. I wasn't sure if these things were taking me over or if I was taking them over. The voices I'd been hearing for years stopped when I morphed into another entity. It was like when I was myself. I was between 2 radio stations getting hints of Katy Perry here, snippets of Joel Plaskett there. When I was something else, everything came in clear in my mind. More and more I started drifting to these objects, becoming them. When I was walking outside in the pouring rain, I reached out to the motor on the bus, covered and dry. When I was nervous, I felt for the couch, safe and secure. It sounds stupid, but when I was jealous and depressed about some girl not liking me, I searched for the toilet paper in our house, used by everyone and always desired. Although my senses were alert as objects, I could see, I could smell, I could feel. I lost the ability to move. As a sprig of grass, you can't duck out of the way of the blades of a lawnmower. As a shoe, you can't hide from the new puppy's tiny little teeth. It was one of the easiest, best things about being something inhuman. I couldn't make a choice. And if you can't make a choice, you can never, ever be wrong. It wasn't long before I started taking more than I was giving to these things. I spent more and more time being something else until I didn't really feel like myself anymore. Being a doorknob, a dishwasher, an iPod, it was all just so much more satisfying than being me. I was needed, wanted, an integral part of people's lives, of everyone's life. As a pair of mittens, I felt good knowing I was giving someone warmth. As a baby soother, I was comforted knowing that I had one purpose and I was entirely doing my job. It was just so much more satisfying than being human. A human can let people down. We disappoint. Worse, we're disappointed ourselves. Being a human hurts. It hurts in an emotional, painful way that being a broken Xbox or a shitty router just doesn't. And I was doing everything I could to avoid it. When I was something else, my body went on working. I don't know how. I couldn't know how since I wasn't really there. But whenever I returned to my human self, I was still functioning. I got off at my bus stop. I gave my weekly presentation. I paid my tab at the bar. To be blunt, I was alive, but I wasn't really living. I was only living when I was something else, anything else that I can say made me feel truly alive. Even something as basic as a wall, and I felt more alive than I had ever felt as a human. As the years went by, I spent less time as a body carrying around a tired brain, and more time as the everyday objects around your home. And tonight, I was a wall. I was a beautiful, strong, important wall. I was holding up a house, holding up a home, holding up a family. I was watching to make sure a baby didn't fall prey to SIDS. I was looking to ensure the pasta didn't boil over. I heard words of anger, of apology, and of love. I heard everything and said nothing, the perfect confidant. As a wall, I heard glass break in the window of the door. I saw shards hit the floor, sharp and sudden. I watched a hand slide through the break and turn the lock. Seeing without eyes and hearing without ears, I was witness to a figure walking through a house where he didn't belong. As a wall, I could do nothing. As a man, I could have done anything. As a wall, I was watching a heavy-lidded man step down the stairs with a broomstick clutched in his quivering hands. A stair creaked, and I thought, I'm glad I'm not that stair. I'm glad I'm not to blame. And then a gun came out, and a bullet fired, and it missed the man, but it hit the wall.